Well, hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Crazy Horse Memorial. My name is Darren Thompson. I'm from Flambeau, Wisconsin. Is anyone here from Wisconsin? Just me. Okay, cool. I actually currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. I used to live here in Rapid City for 4 years. I've been coming up here to perform at the Crazy Horse Memorial for 9 years now. So, been quite a journey, been quite an amazing experience up here. And there's a lot of things I've experienced and learned while being up here as an individual and as a person, but also from you all as well. So again, welcome to Crazy Horse today. I'm a Native American flute player. I talk about the history of the instrument, how it's made, what are some of the songs and some areas that this instrument has been in that you may not have realized. So in the middle of it all, I talk a lot about history in regards to the songs. And again, I'm from Flambeau, Wisconsin, and the reason I ask if any of you are from Wisconsin, because if you are from Wisconsin, you will know that if I say I'm from Flambeau, I'm Ojibwe. So I say that to say I'm an Ojibwe person. That's the tribe that my father is from. My mother is a Tohono O'odham woman from southern Arizona. That is the tribe where 84 miles of their reservation lies on the United States-Mexico border. So to most people, they will assume that I look Hispanic or Mexican, right? Well, I get it from my mom. So I look like a splitting image of my mother, and my parents met in Lawrence, Kansas, at now known as the Haskell Nations University. It was a former boarding school, and I'll talk about the boarding school stuff a little bit later. But I taught myself how to play these instruments while I was going to my undergraduate studies at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I got a bachelor's degree in criminology and law studies. Ever since I finished, I've never used it, so I'm the first member of my family to get a bachelor's degree, and ever since I finished, I've been playing music, however. So I have no musical background prior to picking up this instrument. I've been very, very privileged to perform all over the world, performed at the White House, very honored and excited to share that for the first time in my career, I will be performing at the Santa Fe Indian Market in August of 2023. I'm the first person in my family and the first person from the Ojibwe tribe to be performing down there. If you don't know what it is, more than $1 billion of sales Indian trades happened during that weekend. It is massive. It is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. And so my people of the Ojibwe, where I'm enrolled in, were known by other names. We're known as the Ojibwa, and we're also known as the Chippewa. The word Chippewa comes from the French people. Our people met them in a lake called Lake Superior on an island known to you all as Madeline Island. It was renamed Madeline Island because the French couldn't say what the Ojibwe people called it, which is pronounced in our language Moning Wane Kaning. And it means land of the gold-breasted woodpecker. So they couldn't say Moning Wane Kaning, and then they renamed it Madeline Island. So a lot of people assume it's named after a significant woman or a significant girl. No, they just could not say Moning Wane Kaning, right? So our people led the French down through tributaries from Lake Superior through a river known as the Bear River, and they led him to this community that our people call Waswaganing, which means the place of the flames or the place of the torches, which is also what Lac du Flambeau means in the French language. Our people long ago were using torches at night at the tips of our canoes, which were made out of birch bark, which is wrapped around a tree. There was a canoe of similar fashion made here in the museum. We were using that light to see the reflection of the flame under a water for a particular fish, which is known as the walleye. I don't know if you ever heard of the fish named the walleye, but if you shine a light at them at night, their eyes shine very bright, much brighter than any other fish. And our people were spearfishing the walleye, and our people retained that right when we negotiated our treaties with the federal government in the 1860s. The Lac du Flambeau Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa Indians is the only federally recognized tribe out of 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States that can legally spearfish walleye off of an Indian reservation because of conversations that our people had in the 1760s with the British people. They asked us to become allies with them, and our people wanted to remain neutral of European conflicts or issues, and it comes from a prophecy that our people had a long, long time ago. Our people are originally from the eastern coast on the Atlantic Ocean, and one of our people long ago had a vision that said that one day there would be another group of people coming from the big water to the east. In other words, we knew you all were coming here before you got here. So we started migrating west, and from the vision came the instructions to look for the place where food grew on water. That food on water in our language is pronounced manumin, and it means the good seed. In your language, you know it as wild rice. And we met lots of other people on that journey that are still known to this day by words that stem from the Ojibwe people and their language. One of them is the Sioux. So when we met the French in the late 1600s, we were fighting with another group of people to our south, which in our language, we were calling them Navajo Sioux, which means enemy, because at the time we were fighting and feuding with them over personal issues between a heartbreak between a man and a woman a long time ago. So the French couldn't say Navajo Sioux, and they started calling that tribe the Sioux tribe. So that is why if you meet someone who is believed to be from that tribe and you ask them if they are Sioux, they will tell you we call ourselves Lakota, Dakota, or Nakota, which in their language means a friend. So they have a dialect difference in their language. Their dialect varies by their consonants as opposed to their vowels, right? So my people of the Ojibwe people, we have 2 unique world records in the Guinness Book of World Records. They are the world's most difficult language to learn, and that varies depending on who's on the board and the judging committee by year. And the other is the world's longest word, which still we have that record, which is 23 syllables. It is pronounced Mini Bushko Sijigani Batuna Shigani Bakwejigan, and it means blueberry pie. There's 23 syllables in the word. So there's another group of people that you might have heard of that come from the Ojibwe people and their language, and one such word is the people to the north, perhaps the Inuits or northern Canada or Alaska, the tribe you might have heard of or call the Eskimo. That is an Ojibwe word which refers to raw fish. So if you ever meet them and you ask them, "Are you an Eskimo?" they will correct you and say, "We call ourselves Inuit or Yupik," or there's hundreds of tribes that exist up there, so unfortunately that name still sticks around. There's lots of other names and lots of other tribes that stem from our language, and I'll get to them later. The first song I'm going to play for you is a very old song that I heard played by a very well-known flute player by the name of Raymond Carlos Nakai. A lot of people know him as R. Carlos Nakai. He's the only Native American musician that has a platinum musical album, and all he does is play the Native American flute, and he actually has 2 platinum albums. He played this song called the Zuni Sunrise Song, which was recorded in 1896 by the Smithsonian Institution, where the institution went to different Indian reservations throughout the United States. There are only 212 Indian reservations in the United States. And when they went there, they went to record the language, music, songs, and stories of a people who were not predicted to live past 2 or 3 generations after living on the Indian reservations. So, nonetheless, those songs that were recorded are a foundation for us, because there was a period of our history where our people were not permitted to practice our traditions and speak our languages, which is why you understand the language that I'm speaking. I speak your language, right? So this song has 4 verses to it. It comes from the Pueblo tribe. If you didn't know this, there's a current Pueblo woman who is our current Secretary of Interior. She's the first American Indian person to be confirmed by the Senate to serve in a president's cabinet. Her name is Deborah Holland, and she's an enrolled citizen of the Laguna Pueblo people of New Mexico. This song comes from the Zuni Pueblo people of New Mexico and Arizona. I'll talk about this a little later. Here's this song. Again, thank you for coming to the Crazy Horse Memorial. This is a handmade flute. I'll talk more about it after this song. All right, thank you. Oh, quick show of hands. How many of you are here on vacation? All right, welcome. So I kind of am too. The Black Hills are a very beautiful space. I look forward to every opportunity I can to be here. And I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. Down there, I am a social worker. I work with people who are in recovery from addiction. I use an old technique to teach people how to work with porcupine quills, which takes a long, long time. So prior to Europeans arriving here and to placing beads on our clothing, we used to use porcupine quills. We still do. They just take a lot longer. This is the beginning of a project, and this is on birch bark. So there's a technique that we do to place these in here, to even how to work with them. But our people believe, not only our people, but people believe that we have ancestral DNA. So I work with them in that capacity, and also I am a journalist. I work for a company called Native News Online, and I write about Indian affairs throughout the United States. I've been very privileged to be in the space with 3 separate presidents and obviously 3 separate vice presidents, and I learn a lot in these spaces, and I'm very committed to the narrative and to how people know and learn about who we are as a people. So earlier I said there are 212 Indian reservations in the United States, and there are 574 federally recognized tribes. So what that means is that not all federally recognized tribes have an Indian reservation. So I'm gonna let you in on an inside joke among us Indian people. When we meet someone else who's from an Indian tribe, one of the questions we ask them is, do you have a reservation, right? So what this also speaks to is that although all Indian reservations will have Indian people living on them, not all Indian people have a reservation, and there's lots of reasons why, right? So that number of 574 is expected to grow. There are lots of other people who were here prior to the creation of the country, but they did not want to formally engage in relationship with the federal government for their own reasons. I don't know them. So again, that first song I played was called the Zuni Sunrise Song. It's a very well-known song. If you take a liking to this type of music, there are other flute players out there. Odds are you will hear them play a version of the first song that I just played. It's very, very well known. And just to show you, how many of you ever heard the song before, the Zuni Sunrise Song before? Okay. It's still heard and played in very many locations throughout the Southwest. This next song I'm going to play is a song that comes from the 2nd largest tribe in the United States. You might have heard of them. They're known as the Navajo. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Navajo tribe. Okay, so the first or largest populated tribe in the United States is the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. Their numbers are over 420,000 tribal citizens. And the Navajo Nation, there are 400,000 tribal citizens. But to be enrolled in those tribes, there's a difference. So to be enrolled in the Navajo Nation, you have to prove that you are at least 1/4 Navajo. They started taking rolls in 1934. So at some point, you had to have an ancestor who was on that roll, or so on and so forth. You also have to have your parent who is also enrolled in the tribe. The Cherokee Nation, all you need to do is you have to prove that you have a descendant who was on the rolls in 1896, and your parent does not have to be enrolled. And so how to get enrolled in that tribe, you got to go to Tahlequah, Oklahoma. You got to go to the enrollment department, and you got to say, I want an Indian card. I'm kidding. That's what people say when they go there. So this song that I'm going to play was recorded in Window Rock, Arizona in 1904. The Navajo people are famous for a few things. One of them happened during World War II. How many of you have ever heard of the Navajo Code Talkers before? Okay, so a very famous story in 1941. There were 40 young Navajo men who were recruited by the United States Marine Corps to see if they could make it past boot camp. 39 of them made it, and then they were told that they were recruited to help recruit other Navajo men from the reservation, and then went on to recruit 400. And then they all made it past boot camp, And when they made it past boot camp, they were told that they were being sent to a specific unit that did not exist prior to them being in the military, and they had no idea what it was. When they got there, they were told that they were in a unit where they were going to use their code, their language to develop a code, which was kind of confusing for them at the time because it was forbidden for them to speak their language back home. They were going to boarding schools and being punished for speaking their language, right? And so what happened from there is that these people developed this code, and after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, it was put to use, and in 1968, our government revealed that that code was used in the Pacific Campaign, and all of these men were later received a Medal of Honor by United States Congress. So very, very well-known story. Look them up. This song I'm going to play is called the Corn Grinding Song. I don't know if you know this, but the plant of corn originates here in this part of the world. And one of the ways that people preserved it for use at a later time is they will grind it down into a cornmeal or a corn flour, where they'll add water to it later and cook it over a hot surface to make something you might have heard of before called a tortilla. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of a tortilla before. All right. So there's a process that goes with that. And if you make children do this now, they will make comments like it's boring or it's hard. And so what came out of that were these traditions where people started to sing these songs when they would do it. So it was a process, right? So here's one of those songs. This song also has 4 verses. This flute's made out of cedar. The last flute I make these flutes. This flute's made out of walnut. So there's a difference in the tone. So here you go. All right, thank you. If you ever make your way down to the Southwest, you're going to see an image of a really famous flute player that you might have heard of or seen called the Kokopelli. It is a Hopi word that means flute player, and it's so well loved that you can now find the image like at tourist shops, of course, But you can even find the image at Walmart because Walmart went and created copyright of one of those of those images, made it their own, and then now you can find it on some of their merchandise. And it's kind of a chuckle here and there, but they come from old images that can be found in the Southwest that depict this old character, this old person playing the flute a long time ago. So this style of flute is unique in the world because of the way that it's made. There are two separate chambers in the flute. There's one where I put my mouth into, and one where there's the holes here. So there's a separation right where this piece on the top is, where I'm holding on to. If I were to take it off, it wouldn't make noise. And so there's a hole that's under here that this covers that pushes it against this edge here, which is why when I'm playing like this and not like this, because what we hear is the split of my breath against this. So some of my breath goes through the flute and some of it goes outwards, so it's that split that we're hearing, right? And there's some stories that come from different people of how the first flutes came to the people a long time ago. And long ago, the way that I heard this story was a young man was very well known as a hunter and a provider, but he did not have a wife and he did not have a family. So he went to his elders and asked the question of, how do I get a wife? And so they gave him the instructions to go into the forest for 4 days with no food and no water and think about this really hard. And if you can't figure it out while you're out there, we will talk about this when you get back. So there's some dry humor and sarcasm in there. In other words, they sent him out to go out and fast. And I don't know if you've ever gone out to fast in the forest or in the field, but you'll have some visitors. Those visitors can be other animals. If you're lucky enough, you might get you might get the vision. You might get a message, right? So while this man was out there, he was crossed paths by a woodpecker, and our people believe if a woodpecker ever comes to visit you, it brings a good message. So he decides, because he had nothing else to do, follow the woodpecker, and it led him to some cedar trees. And he heard a voice he had never heard before, and he realized he only heard the voice when the wind blew. So he figured out where this voice was coming from, and he found a small hollowed out piece of wood that has some holes pecked into it, and then took the piece back to his other people and told them the same story, and then they told him to learn how to make it sing the way you heard it sing in the forest, and you'll find yourself a wife, right? And that's exactly what he did, and it worked for him. And all the other young men saw that it worked for him, and started this tradition that when the French Jesuits arrived in the late 1600s and early 1700s, that was one of the things that they wrote down, that they observed, that young men would play these flutes for women in a time before they would get married. And so to this day, there are many families who believe that if you do get married, you cannot play the flute outside of the presence of your wife, right? So that's why I will never get married. But this the most commonly documented song that I've ever heard and found with this instrument is a love song played by a man to a woman. This song I'm going to play was recorded in 1908 in Tama, Iowa, which is the home of the Meskwaki Indian settlement. The Meskwaki Indian tribe is also known by the Sac and Fox tribe, and they were originally from Wisconsin, and they were relocated to Iowa, Kansas, and the state of Oklahoma. They have a very well-known person in their history who went on to be known as athlete of the 20th century, won a couple of gold medals in the 1912 Olympics. His name was Jim Thorpe. I don't know if you ever heard that name before, but after he won the gold medals, the Olympic Committee stripped his medals because they found out he was also a semi-professional baseball player, which back then the rules were you couldn't be a semi-professional athlete and also compete in the Olympics, so they took his medals away. Well, August 8th, 2022, the International Olympic Committee restored his medals to his family. His family had advocated for them for more than 100 years. So this song was recorded again in Tama, Iowa by a woman by the name of Frances Densmore. This woman lived in Red Wing, Minnesota, and she spent all of her own money and went to all these different Indian reservations in the northern Mississippi River and the northern Great Lakes because she had a love and a liking to Indian culture and people. And so she invited all these people to come record their stories and come record their songs. And these songs are now permanently in our Library of Congress and in our National Archives and were acquired by the Smithsonian Institution. This flute that I'm going to play is made out of ponderosa pine, which are the trees you see here in the Black Hills. It's a hardwood. It's got a very bright, vibrant voice to it. This song also has 4 verses to it. All right, thank you. All right, the next song I'm going to play is a Lakota song. It's a well-known song from around these parts. There are lots and lots of Lakota love songs. No one could ever know them all. But I was taught this song a few years ago by a very well-known flute player by the name of Kevin Locke. He performed up here at Crazy Horse for many, many years and passed away last September after his very last performance over in Hills City. And I took it very personally because I share a part of what he started in my work. He's traveled the world more than 80 times. There are lots and lots of people outside of the United States who are very interested in America's first people. So when people come here, one of the things that people want to see is they want to see the Grand Canyon from outside the United States. They want to go to New York and they want to see Indians for, I don't know why, but so he did very well overseas, and this song was originally recorded in 1941 in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I played this song for the oldest living person of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in the later part of 2016 when I was up there. One of my friends had her grandmother was celebrating her 100th birthday, and that was the oldest living person of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. There is a very famous person who comes from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe that you've heard of in the English language. His name is Sitting Bull. He was the first and only Lakota man to be appointed to be the overall leader or Ogichida or chief of the Lakota people. There has not been one since. Nonetheless, he used to fast and pray at a space not too far from here, just by Sturgis, called Bear Butte. He used to also go up to this tall place here in the Black Hills now called Black Elk's Peak, which, if you didn't know this, the Catholic Church has accepted a nomination by a local Catholic diocese in Rapid City to consider a person by the name of Nicholas Black Elk to be canonized by the Catholic Church. So, if it is accepted, he will be the second indigenous person of the Western Hemisphere to be canonized by the Catholic Church. The first one is Kateri Tekakwitha, who's a Mohawk woman who passed away in the late 1600s, and she was canonized in 2012. By the Catholic Church. So that took 400 years for that to happen. And after that, these people who advocated for her canonization continued on to also advocate for the canonization of Nicholas Black Elk, because he was later not adopted, but he later converted to Christianity. He was considered the most significant Lakota cultural and spiritual leader because he had a vision. And in his vision, when he was 13 years old, this vision said that there were people falling from the sky wearing blue clothing. And when the Battle of the Little Bighorn happened and people were on the ground wearing blue clothing, because he was a child then, he felt a lot of people took note that this person had that vision. Okay, so let's move forward. He also had a vision that his people would one day live in square or rectangle homes, because for time immemorial, the Lakota people lived in circle homes, and it's a part of their philosophy, it's a part of their way of life and where they greet the day every day, so on and so forth. So when these things started happening, people started listening to this person. So then the Catholic Church tried relentlessly to convert him to Christianity because he maintained these old traditions for many generations. So if it happens, there'll be a big celebration over here. After I played this song for this woman, she went on to live to be 102. She said, "I've always wanted a man to play the flute for me." This flute is made out of white cedar. It has 4 verses to it, this song. All right, thank you. The next song I'm going to play is a song you've all heard of before. It's called Amazing Grace, and the reason I'm playing it is because you've all heard it before. Kidding, bad joke. There's a story behind this song. It was played on the Native American flute in outer space at the International Space Station in 2002. There was a Chickasaw man by the name of John Harrington. Anyone ever heard of John Harrington? He was one of our astronauts. Not everybody grows up to be an astronaut, right? So he was also an enrolled person of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma, which is the 4th populated tribe in the United States. The 3rd is the Choctaw Nation. They have 212,000 tribal citizens down and around Durant, Oklahoma down there. But he went up to the International Space Station and played Amazing Grace because it was his people's national anthem. His people of the Chickasaw and 4 other tribes that were known collectively as the 5 civilized tribes. They were the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Creek, and the Seminoles. They were called the 5 civilized tribes because they converted to Christianity, and they developed a written language, their own alphabet, where they communicated with each other, and a little bit for you. The oldest running newspaper in Indian country is the Cherokee Phoenix. Started in 1832. It's still running. Nonetheless, I don't know if you know this, but those tribes were the result of the Indian Removal Act, which was signed back in 1834 by former President Andrew Jackson, and these big tribes were all marched to this new place called Indian Territory, which is now the state of Oklahoma, where lots and lots of people lost their lives, thousands of people. It is still known, that journey is still known to this day by the tribes as the Trail of Tears. But on that journey, these people all sang this song, Amazing Grace. And in 1934, after the Congress passed the Indian Reorganization Act, which essentially says that all federally recognized tribes need to adopt a constitution and a criteria similar to the United States Constitution. All of these tribes went on to adopt this song as their national anthem. So, as he played the song, the flute will be on permanent display at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. This flute is tuned to a minor pentatonic scale, which means that I won't hit all the notes of the song, but I will try my best. So here you go. All right, thank you. Again, everyone, welcome to the Crazy Horse Memorial. My name is Darren Thompson. If you want to listen to this kind of music, my name is on that piece of paper right there. I also have cards to give you if you want one. It's telling of the times when you go to Goodwill and you could not find a CD player there anymore. So I've released 3 albums to my name. I've been nominated as a finalist in the Native American Music Awards in the flute category. I'm the first person in my family, first person in my tribe to be in the category. The category is usually overrun by Lakota, Cherokee, or Navajo flute players. You know, those are the big tribes. Collectively, the Ojibwe people, where more of us are in Canada, we range as far north as the Hudson Bay, which is way up there in northern Ontario, down to having land in the city of Chicago, which, by the way, is an Ojibwe word, which means land of the skunks. So Chicago is short of Chicagoning, which means the place of the skunks, okay? So we're as far east as Quebec to as far west to having a federally recognized tribe in the state of Montana. So we have a dialect in our language. Our people speak and use the language a little differently. My name in my language is pronounced Nawakumik, and when I'm home, I'm called Darren. So we still use English, you know. My spirit name came to me when I was 21 after my father asked our person who we trust to give me a name, which took about a year of the person thinking of my name and spending time with me. And the word Nawakumik means center of the universe, and I didn't know what it meant for a while. A few years later, when I was living and working in Washington, D.C., I used to work for an organization called the National Congress of American Indians. Lots of fun times over there. I was in the Smithsonian's museum, and I felt something touch me in the chest that was non-physical. I don't know, I just had this feeling. I'm not particularly a suspicious person. Later on, I meet someone from the Smithsonian's National Archives, and he asks where I'm from, and I said I'm from Lac de Flambeau. And he asks me if I know a person by his first name, and that person by that first name was the person who gave me my name. So I was like, of course I know him. How do you know him? And he said, there's been an item identified in the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian that is believed to belong to Lac de Flambeau. And then I recalled this funny experience I had earlier where I saw something, and that something was a drum. And I was taught when I was very young that when a drum looks a particular way, this is something you would not hear if I wasn't talking about it, but it is something that is supposed to be protected and covered at all times. So I knew that the protocol of showing it was incorrect. So that's why I had that feeling. So lo and behold, I asked him, is it this item that is on display at the Smithsonian? And he said, yes. So then I get home and I call the guy back home and I told him I met this person. And then he said that there's a law that will take in effect, and it's called the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. The acronym is NAGPRA, which allows our people to repatriate human remains. There are more than 110 human remains belonging to our people still in possession of the federal government. And then items of significant cultural value, which is interpretive, right? So, long story longer, we were able to bring that item back home because it was taken from our people in the very early 1900s, and it is an item of significant cultural value to our people because it was given to us by the Dakota people in 1868 as a peace offering. After many years of fighting and feuding, we decided to make peace, and they were presented to us in Mille Lacs, Minnesota, which is about an hour north of the Twin Cities. And that is, because of that happened, I will always be a believer in our way of life and in our culture. And it's a very beautiful experience, I can say, that I had growing up on the Indian reservation in Wisconsin. I went on to get an education. I was very ambitious, and I've spent the majority of my adult life pursuing my ambition, right? So this last song I'm going to play for you is my own song. This is a decorated flute that has the head of a woodpecker in it. There's a story of how this flute came to the people, and it involves, again, the woodpecker. I tell the story of how the woodpecker lost its voice to children all over the United States. Raise your hand if you've ever heard a woodpecker before, right? Silly question. So when I ask kids this, I ask them to make the noise that the woodpecker makes, and it's never a chirp. It's always a boy walking up to the wall, banging his head, right? So, and I do that to emphasize that I set up the stage to tell the story of how the woodpecker lost its voice a long, long time ago. I'll tell that story at my next show, but this song is my own song, inspired by these old stories from a long time ago. So here you go. All right, thank you. All right, so I have time for one more story. Again, welcome, and thank you for coming to the Crazy Horse Memorial. I'll be on again at 1:30. You can come up and take a look at the flutes or some of my quills, or take a picture with me if you'd like. I do have information if you want to take it home with you. But this is a story that I heard a lot while growing up. I heard a lot of stories while growing up, not knowing their significance until I moved away from home, right? Because everybody back home hears all these stories. This is just like everyday life. Well, after we hear the creation story, which takes 7 days to tell, we hear the story of, if you take away all of our four-legged relatives from the earth, life on earth would not be able to sustain itself. If you take away all of our winged relatives away from the earth, life on earth would not be able to sustain itself. If you took away all of our plant relatives from the earth, life on earth would not be able to sustain itself. If you took away all the water from the earth, life on earth would not be able to sustain itself. And it goes on and ends with, if you take away man from the earth, life on earth would flourish. So having said that, thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy your stay here in the hills. If you're weary about trying buffalo, like eating it, don't. It's really good. It's very, very good and lean and healthy food. They don't pay me for that, but try it out. Thank you.